Winter in wartime was a silent enemy. It crept into homes, froze water in the pails, and stiffened fingers until they could no longer tie a rope or light a fire. In the bitter winters of World War II, civilians from Leningrad to London, Warsaw to the Welsh countryside fought not just bombs and bullets, but cold, hunger and darkness. Imagine a family in 1942 huddled in a one-room flat, breath clouding the air, a candle flickering low. Food was rationed to crumbs. Coal was rarer than gold, and yet many survived not by chance but by mastering forgotten skills, methods that kept children alive, kept neighbours warm and kept spirits unbroken. These are the stories and lessons from the winters that tested humanity's endurance. In the countryside of occupied Poland, families turned to the earth itself as their refrigerator. Without electricity, the only way to keep potatoes, carrots, turnips and beets edible through winter was to dig deep pits or use existing root cellars lined with straw. Diaries from Ukrainian farmers tell of vegetables buried beneath mounds of soil, sometimes hidden under woodpiles to avoid confiscation. The cool, stable underground temperature meant food could last months without spoiling. Today, this same method works for anyone with a garden. A simple buried barrel or insulated pit can store food without a single watt of power. In the bomb-damaged kitchens of London's East End, fuel was strictly rationed. Housewives learned to cook not just frugally, but cleverly. One method involved bringing a pot of stew to boil on the fire, then wrapping it in blankets or hay inside a hay box to let residual heat finish the cooking. This thermal cooking meant coal lasted twice as long. A 1941 Women's Voluntary Service pamphlet even instructed, "Do not waste heat, trap it." This simple method kept meals hot for hours and used almost no extra fuel, a principle still used in modern thermal cookers. Wool was priceless during the war. Families often unravelled old jumpers to reknit socks, gloves and scarves. In the Soviet Union, one diary from the siege of Leningrad tells of women sewing layers of cloth from torn bed sheets into jackets, sometimes stuffing them with newspaper for insulation. Every scrap of fabric had value. A philosophy alien to today's throwaway culture. They wore multiple thin layers rather than one heavy coat, trapping warm air between fabrics. This principle, many layers, many barriers, is still more effective for warmth than a single thick garment. When rations failed, folks turned to the hedgerows, forests, and even the weeds growing between cobblestones. British children learned to spot rosehips rich in vitamin C to keep scurvy at bay. Out in rural France, nettles, dandelion leaves and mushrooms, well, they became staples in soups. Finnish war diaries, they record families getting by on pine bark bread when flour ran out. This deep connection to local plants, it really meant survival when shops were empty. And you know, modern survivalists still talk about this knowledge. In winter, plants like chickweed, wintercress and pine needle tea can honestly mean the difference between sickness and health. In villages all across Eastern Europe, entire families, sometimes even more than one household, would sleep in a single room, sealing up doors and windows with rags just to keep the heat in. There's this remarkable account from a Norwegian fishing village where people actually took turns sleeping in the warmest corner of the room, near the stove, while others rotated to the colder spots. The combined body heat and shared resources meant fewer fires were needed, saving precious wood and coal. This idea of concentrating warmth instead of heating big spaces, well, it's still one of the most energy-efficient survival tactics around. Long before there were freezers, civilians relied on salting, fermenting and drying. In wartime Germany, sauerkraut barrels lined the basements. Cabbage could last for months when it was fermented. Over in the Italian countryside, tomatoes were dried on rooftops in late summer, then packed away in oil. A Belarusian farmer's diary, it remembers hanging salted fish from the rafters in an unheated attic, where the winter air acted as a natural preservative. These low-tech methods kept nutrients high and brought much-needed variety to diets that would otherwise be dominated by bread and potatoes. When fuel was gone, well, that's when ingenuity took over. In Athens during the winter famine of 1941 to 42, residents burned olive pits, old furniture, and even shredded paper to create heat. In Yugoslav villages, they crafted clay heat bricks from a mixture of mud, straw and dung, drying them in the sun before burning them slowly for warmth. The creativity didn't stop there. Some families turned metal biscuit tins into makeshift stoves using small twigs. The lesson is clear, my friends. In survival mode, almost any combustible material can be adapted, and small heat sources in insulated spaces can be life-saving. In diaries from both sides of the front, one theme stands out. Survival wasn't only about food or heat, but about the will to endure. In a besieged Dutch town, neighbours organised evening sing-alongs in the dark to keep spirits up. Over in Leningrad, people traded recipes for imaginary feasts, reciting them like prayers. And in a London shelter, one woman wrote, "If I can make the children laugh, the cold matters less." Maintaining a sense of purpose, community and even humour was as vital as calories or blankets. The mind's resilience could mean the difference between giving up and seeing spring arrive. The people who endured those deadly winters didn't have survival handbooks or modern gear. They had ingenuity, tradition, and an unbreakable will. They reused, shared, adapted, and looked to the land for sustenance. Today, in a world of convenience, their methods may seem like relics, yet in moments of crisis, these same skills could once again keep families alive. The winters of World War II remind us that survival is not just about stockpiles. It's about community, creativity, and the knowledge passed down through generations. If these stories of endurance have inspired you, do share this with others. Subscribe to In the Beginning for more true stories of human resilience, because the lessons of the past may one day be the key to our future.